Oh, hi Jacob, by the way, as well. I see you're muted now.
Yeah.
I was
Hey
jealous looking at
guys,
your feed. I saw snow.
No.
Yeah.
it's uh, it's just a tad snowy here
I
in
What
know.
state are you in?
Wisconsin.
Oh, dang. Okay.
Yeah.
Are you in
So,
Madison?
no, Milwaukee.
I miss snow. Like when I was younger, it used to snow quite a lot here in like southeast England. But we're in a very weird bubble where I am. Um, we're kind of elevated, where everywhere around us is like lower down. So whenever there's like heat waves, for example, earlier on in 2020, where like it was just boiling and crazy, and then suddenly everyone was getting thunderstorms except for us. And then like when it gets to snowing, like tons of people around the area get snowing except for us. We're like in this weird bubble where things don't really happen. So been missing out. But we had 1 day of snow this year so far where I am, and we took Penny out in the garden and got her to experience it, and that was nice. So took lots of pictures.
How much did it snow?
Not a lot, just like it was a couple of centimeters, and then it was like
Oh,
gone a few hours later.
no, it doesn't stick.
No,
Or it sticks a little bit and then melts.
yeah,
When I moved out here in 2006, we were delayed because we had like 17 inches of snow. And
damn.
it delayed our move by a whole day. They couldn't get the moving truck in. So, and then we got out here, it was like February, and I woke up the next morning and it was like sunny and like 65 degrees out. I'm like, palm trees swaying. I'm like, I've arrived.
I feel like this year maybe a lot more people can actually enjoy the snow now that they're locked up and not having
Yeah.
to travel through it. So for the podcast, there are a couple of things I want to discuss if people are up for it, because I tend to use this podcast as like a way of getting things off my chest and like organizing ideas. So one of the things that I want to talk about is like my direction changes, and I was going to say giving up on YouTube for dramatic effect, but that's not true. Um,
Dun-dun-dun.
yeah, I'm making YouTube a smaller part of my business now, business in quotes, and Patreon will be a bigger part of it. And it's because, like, you spend so much time making videos, trying to like raise the view counts and sub counts, but then like there comes a point where you look at it and you think it's like the amount of effort isn't really making that much of a difference. Because when that lidar video blew up, like I could see it was a very inorganic like moment when you look at the entire graph from like the lifetime perspective. You spend so long trying to get view counts up, but they stay consistent, and then all of a sudden one day it gets picked up, like a video gets picked up for extreme recommendations. And I don't think it's even necessarily to do with a popular subject or a thumbnail or a title. I feel like if that video came out like a day before or a day after, it wouldn't have been picked up. And you feel like there are so many videos and like so many moments like that you miss and you're always trying to achieve.
Mhm.
And you think all that time spent on making videos that are easily consumed and easily discarded, for them not to like have that time could have been spent doing better things, better time investments, more enjoyable things. Because a lot of the videos you choose to do are ones that you may not be entirely interested in, but they're good choices from a business perspective. Like, oh, here's an affiliate one for this week, or here's like a news one for this. And even looking at the graphs, like when I'm releasing new videos, it feels like that YouTube has a budget for recommendations, where if you release something new, it stops recommending like old ones and starts recommending the new one to prioritize new content. But it means like you're constantly in this kind of feeling that you need to keep up and catch up, but stuff isn't really accumulating, if this makes sense. Because like on other platforms, not all of them, but other ones, it will keep recommending content to the same degree throughout its entire lifespan, right? But that doesn't happen on YouTube. So it feels like the amount of effort you've put into videos in the past isn't really worth it, because as soon as you make something new, you've kind of like nullified that in a way. So yeah, and even when I've put out new videos that suddenly do terribly in terms of average, it still doesn't like hardly affect the daily view count. Like you put out something new, like I did. The first video that didn't hit 1,000 views in a day because it was a podcast one, and the daily view count is still like the same as it always was. And so it's like you're kind of you don't have much control over it. And I'm kind of thinking, well, it's pointless. It's pointless trying to reach high amounts when like you could be spending that time doing other things. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm spending my time on Patreon, I'm spending my time on the podcast, and YouTube's just going to be a thing that I shove stuff on. And I've gotten really, really, really bored of trying to optimize things for like the algorithm's interest. So I've gone back and I've remade tons of thumbnails to make them more consistent. Less interesting, but more consistent. So that's what I did with the recent one. The recent podcast episode is literally just like blue bars and text. Like nothing fancy, nothing whatsoever. Now it did worse from a click-through rate, but I'm like, you know what? Sod it. I don't care anymore. That's just how it's going to be. And I feel like I am now at the point where even if the YouTube channel disappeared, I would still have a full-time job. So
Yeah.
I have the confidence to do that now. So that's just something that I'm going through and thinking about. That I'm not obsessing over the idea of maximizing YouTube and like becoming big on YouTube. It's going to be more of like a side piece. So yeah, I just put that on record.
Yeah, I think that's wise. I really do. Over time, it's definitely the right decision. You want to. YouTube is great to build an audience and to get people flowing into like Patreon or whatever you're doing. Whatever your end goal is. But YouTube changes so much, and the algorithm you can't constantly like spend your life like I've realized this too. You can't constantly spend your all your time just chasing an algorithm that you don't fully understand, because like no one does. Like even the compartmentalized, departments in YouTube probably don't fully understand the algorithm. Like there's a core group and trying to like figure it out and game it and get traffic and all that. It's just and then playing the game like I want to grow on YouTube. It's like unless you're like trying to be like the next Mr. Beast or PewDiePie, however you pronounce that guy. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, because I've been having this conversation with like all sorts of other friends on my server to try and get different perspectives. And we've mentioned it on the BlenderNest podcast before, but I have a theory, and like I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it's something that I think is happening. Whether or not it's intentional by design from the algorithm or whether it's just a weird side effect, but I have a theory that YouTube and the algorithm randomly picks the videos to do well for creators occasionally, like super well above an average, so that it gives them a new high target to aim for, so that they keep producing content trying to reach that target again. And in producing that content, it opens up more watch time, for more adverts to be placed on the channel and the website as a whole. And even if that's not an intentional thing, that happens, and it does feel that way, because like as I said, you spend so long trying to prepare the content to get like high views and failing, like you're running to stand still. That's what it feels like, putting so much effort in and not going anywhere. And then one day YouTube goes, this video, and then it does super well and then drops off again, like goes up then immediately back down to your normal, not an organic ramp up or ramp down, just boop. And it's like, well, it's almost like a middle finger to all the effort you've put into everything else. Like, oh, so I see you were trying. Haha, here you go. Try. Good luck reaching that again. It's not a very
it's kind of like what do they call that thing that pimps do? Love bombing, where you give someone loads of attention all of a sudden, so they'll act right in the future.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you say, oh, you're so special, baby, and like all the rest of it, and then you go back to slapping them the next day, but you know that they'll always be trying for that little bit of attention that they got. Like, oh yeah, it worked last time. Maybe if I do something right again, I'll keep uploading, and maybe the algorithm will pick me or whatever.
Exactly.
That's how cults recruit also.
Yeah, it does feel like that sometimes.
Love bombing. Yep. Make people feel like, hey, this is the right place to be. I'm gonna put everything out. Oh, look at that! I like reached success, and then all of a sudden, boom! It's like, nope.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that TikTok got so big really quick, because everybody thinks they're famous on TikTok. Because the first few videos that you put up, it shows to everybody, and it's nothing for TikTok to do that, because it's literally just a scroll, right? There's no like effort has to go into watching a video. You just scroll up and it shows you a video. That's a view. So it can give loads of views to new users, and they all think, oh, wow, I'm like an influencer on TikTok or whatever. And I know loads of people who thought they'd like made it on TikTok, and now they get no views, and they're like back to scrambling around, and they're still trying to get back to where they were.
Yeah.
And it's like you could probably start a new account and you'd get a load of views again because the algorithm wouldn't know that you're the same person.
So I've been trying to find like the words to put this feeling into perspective, but I think you summed it up really well there, Rob.
I know exactly what you mean. When my channel started to blow up, I did everything wrong from the view of getting big because I hardly ever uploaded content. Because I made this channel kind of in a panic. Like I had this plan to do. I'm going to do these really big videos that I know will do well. But I'd only been using Blender like a year and a half or something. Then 2.8 came out. And all these channels were getting really big, and I saw that, and I thought, oh, I need to jump on this now. I'll just start making anything.
Yeah.
And then it did better than I expected it to do, especially when I went for like the new style of content, which is more like story-driven. That really took off, and I just thought, okay, I've got enough views coming in where I can kind of keep stoking this and keep the channel from not dying, while I can go away and like work on actually getting good at Blender. So I've spent most of the last year kind of with the channel as a second thought, just while I've been working on all this extra stuff. So like next year I can go, okay, this is what I always really planned on doing with the channel.
Yeah.
Ian Hubert is a good example of this too, because I think he rarely uploads to YouTube. But he has a massive Patreon following, and puts out like I'm a patron of Ian Hubert, and he puts out so much stuff that's so fun to play with, so useful. Like it's fun to like use the scans that you see in his like epic creations. So and he's very engaged with his patrons. That might be because that's who he is, but it also might be because he has the time to do so. And it doesn't seem like his lack of posting on YouTube has hurt his growth. You know, perhaps it's even helped his growth.
Yeah, he's kind of an anomaly because he got super huge with that format, and I mean he's a really nice guy and fun like to watch, and was able to just funnel people into Patreon. When he launched his Patreon, like it was, I mean he's over 3,000 patrons now, and it's phenomenal. And you know I want to sign up just because I don't know, because I like him, and I haven't yet because I've been so busy. But I want to do it when I have time to actually go through the stuff, because his stuff is really good. But it's just amazing what he's been able to pull off, uploading such little amount. But he was able to do that because his stuff completely blew up on YouTube, because it was a fresh format. We all tried to jump on because it was genius. But
I first saw Ian Hubert stuff on Instagram actually, like 2 years ago, before I really started using Blender. And it was just like, I think at that time, I'm not sure if that's still true now, but there's like a time limit on Instagram that's pretty short. So he would fit these tutorials, these really fast-paced tutorials, into 1 minute span. And the growth started from there. I started following him, when he had like 700 followers. That was the hook for me.
Yeah, it was.
He was posting stuff for a really long time as well before the lazy tutorials. Like, if you check out his YouTube account, he's been posting things for like 10 years.
10 years,
like,
he's been on there. It goes
back a long, long time.
And he was like skimming the bottom for such a long time, like like a few thousand subscribers or whatever, and then all of a sudden, like he took the stuff from Instagram, that really cool condensed short video type stuff, and put it on YouTube, and it just blew up. Like the algorithm loved it and gave him everything. The point what I was getting at was the chicken or the egg thing. It's like he got a lot, he got that initial surge, and then he was able to convert a lot of that into Patreon. So now he just focuses on Patreon and uploads to YouTube once every few months or something. He doesn't have to do YouTube at all. Like he has, all he has to do is drop a few cool videos, and if they do really well, he'll pull in new patrons.
I think he's pretty much built his whole thing around that web series that he's working on, Dynamo. Because all his tutorials are based on stuff that he's developing for the web show, and half the things that he puts on Patreon, as far as I've seen, it's the same thing. It's like the last one he did with all the rigging experiments, were because he was like, oh, I need to learn rigging for the characters that I'm doing in this. I may as well make a tutorial out of it.
Yep.
It's a smart way to work if you can like figure out, okay, this is what I actually want to do, and here's how I can sort of monetize the process of making it.
Oh yeah,
it's really clever. He's augmenting kind of the time spent on project by just sharing that. And I love that.
Yeah.
Like that's so inspiring as
It is.
a creator, as a Blender user, as somebody who's into film and filmmaking. Just being able to think like, okay, I have to do this thing for the shot, one specific thing. Maybe let's say rigging. I got to learn how to do it. May as well just record it and then show other people while I do it. And obviously, he's so like personable in his videos. And they're short and to the point, and you learn a lot, and they're just perfectly timed. Even though he's talking really fast, you get like, you know, just enough time to breathe before he goes on to the next thing. And this looks cool, and this little thing, I'm going to put it over here, and then maybe it won't be so good, but maybe we'll try. I don't know. And then you're just like, I love watching this, you know. And it doesn't take up too much time. It's 2 minutes, maybe 3. I think the previous one that he said that he posted was about 5 minutes of random stuff he hadn't shown before. But it's 5 solid minutes of like beautiful renders, and you know, I just look at them and I go, okay, I want to like you. You just want to watch Dynamo right away. You're like, just drop it, just finish it, just show me, because you're showing me these highlights, which are probably just like works in progress, and I want to see the whole thing. But it's a really clever way to work, and like kind of in the same vein of as the conversation started. Something I've been struggling with is thinking, this is going to be really specific, but like I know that yellow text on thumbnails is doing really well right now. But I just like, I don't really like the color yellow. Like I don't I feel like if I did that, I would be selling out my soul, just because I don't want that. I just don't like it. Personally, right? But if you do it, it's been proven, but like by several people. There was you know, like Mr. Beast and people that have been studying Mr. Beast and kind of trying to replicate what he's doing, just like it works. So there's a fine balance, I think, that some people are playing, especially like in our space, between understanding these things and using them to leverage the algorithm in order to gain inorganic growth, while at the same time, kind of like Ian Hubert style, providing organic value to their followers, to their group, to their community. That's like an interesting point in the middle to find, because I think if I were to, or when I am to start posting things, I would want to hit that. Like I wouldn't want to be posting giant thumbnails that are clickbaity with clickbaity titles and this, that, and the other, because it doesn't feel genuine to me. Yeah. It's not really what I like. I just, you know, it's just going back to the color yellow. I just don't really like it. If it helps people find my content and they will absorb value from that content, then it kind of makes me wonder, like, should I be using the color yellow in my text and thumbnails? So it's really tricky. And the other big thing about that is that it's going to change, kind of like Kevin was saying, like nobody really knows or understands how these things work. But it's not just that, it's that like the YouTube algorithm and the Instagram algorithm and the Twitter algorithm, they're just going to keep changing. And then back to like what Curtis was saying, I think it's really clever and kind of like sentient to try to find a way to make it not so much about your presence on YouTube or on Twitter or on Facebook groups or Clubhouse or whatever you're using, but just more about like you as a person. So instead of having your landing page be, go to my Instagram, which might change, you might gain some or lose some followers every day, have it be about like, you know, this is my website, this is who I am, and this is how you can find me. And then all these other groups and social media are just extensions of my presence online, as opposed to being like the sole purpose and sole kind of a entry point into who you are or what you do.
Yeah, very well said. And a point about like audiences and stuff, like you spend so much time trying to build up something on YouTube, and like the number, because it's a high number, you feel like it has value to it. But like we've spoken on here many times before, just having a high number of people following you doesn't mean it translates into anything useful. Like you could put out a video talking about your Patreon and have it seen by like 10-20,000 people on YouTube if you're lucky, and like have maybe almost no one or only like a few people sign up. Meanwhile, if you did like a nicely crafted tweet about it, you could have like 2-3 times as many people like sign up to the Patreon, but just like almost no one see it by comparison. And it's like, well, it really depends on the actual individual people that are seeing it. And like, I would say but it depends on like exactly who we are, but I've built my business around YouTube, like around the YouTube growth. So from my perspective, it's very difficult to see how the business is being carried by different audiences. And like, I don't know where everyone's coming from when they're buying things. Now, I know that each of these places is making like a certain amount of money, and maybe there's some like organic growth in terms of like following from each of these. But if I cut out YouTube entirely, I don't know how that behaves. I've got mailing lists so I can contact people. I've raised followers on other platforms. But what I'm starting to realize is I don't think it makes that much of a difference if YouTube was removed.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see, Ian's where he's pulling most of his patrons from. Is it YouTube, Instagram, or Twitter? Because he's pretty big on all three. YouTube seems to just be a lot of people. Like if you look at the there's a lot of like content creators on YouTube, but if you look at the comments of a lot of these like videos, and not just Ian, but like the CG Matter and these other guys, like it's just like it's kind of like the joking, funny, haha, kind of like entertainment based stuff that doesn't really pull in, the people who the learners, the people who the content creators, versus like Instagram where you have an artist community and it's not necessarily just people, it's more like targeted, or Twitter, which is like way more targeted. It's not really entertainment based. It's like people like it's just set up differently than YouTube is. So it's like I wonder the ratios for somebody like Ian who has that many patrons, where most of the patrons are coming in from. I don't even know if he would have that data, but it'd be really interesting to know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's hard. I feel like hard to pin. Well, maybe not. It's I guess medium, between easy, hard, and medium. Medium to pin down, because I definitely would like if somebody asked me who is Ian Huber, the first thing that comes to mind wouldn't be to say Ian Huber is a YouTuber, because I don't find that like he's honed in to YouTube specifically, right? Like he's a visual effects artist, he's a creator, he's this, that, and the other, but he's not a YouTuber. And there's definitely people in the space, definitely like whatever you want to call them, influencers, content creators, what have you, that are YouTubers and that they dedicate their growth, their time, their energy, their work into making YouTube work for them, which is kind of how we got here. As Curtis was saying, that he is kind of I don't want to put words in your mouth, but kind of from my understanding, distancing yourself from putting too much focus on that one specific aspect of your presence and your work. And so then kind of back to what you were saying, Kev, like what does that make him then? Like, is he an Instagrammer? Because he got really big on Instagram as well. Like I was seeing people, I was like just in my feed on certain hashtags that I followed are Blender related, seeing Ian Hubert's work, but on different accounts that were just like resharing it. But obviously like they're doing it for likes as well too, right? And I'm like, oh, this looks great. Wait a minute, those moths at the end, those are Ian's. Yeah. And so, he got huge on Instagram to the point where people ripped it off. And huge on YouTube as well. A lot of reshares on Twitter, like even on YouTube itself. But I definitely wouldn't say that he's like specifically a YouTuber. And I also wouldn't say like content creator, because that's now got this like weird connotation these days of like, well, it's just about anybody who's snapping a selfie on the street can be a content creator. That, so it's like, I don't know, that an educator in some ways, like I would definitely say so. But it's we're entering this space, and this whole bit of mine is kind of inspired by recent conversations that I've been listening in on. But we're kind of in this space where there's more attention on the providing of value and the retaining of value from people that wouldn't have otherwise either had a platform or had the opportunity to have like a voice to share these things. And that's like really, really exciting, because I can't remember where I read it or who said it, but kind of back to something Curtis was saying earlier, like we've been stuck inside for so long that we've been able to think about the way that we interact with the world and the art that will come from this and has come from this and the parties that will come from this and that have come from this and all these other like tools and mechanisms of communication and self-expression have been augmented by the fact that we've had really time to like sit down and think about this. And so it just like lays the ground for a really exciting future to be a part of, whether you're thinking about it specifically from like a monetary stance of how do I maximize like YouTube audience retention, or how do I make myself feel proud of myself because I feel like I'm putting my best foot forward and creating the content that I wish I could see, even if it doesn't have yellow text over it, even if it doesn't have clickbaity titles, this, that, or the other.
I think on YouTube especially, you can get very, very far without having to like sacrifice what you want to create. Like people get caught in this trap of thinking, oh, well, I have to have yellow text or whatever. And you really don't. Like what Kev was saying earlier on, everybody jumped on the whole like lazy tutorial trend. I didn't do that. I went the opposite way. I'm going to make longer videos. All my videos used to be like 3 or 4 minutes. I'm going to start making like 20-minute videos. Because I realized that I thought a lot of people got it wrong. They looked at Ian's channel and they thought people like these videos because they're fast. And actually people like those videos because they were entertaining, not because they were fast. Yes. It was the extra entertainment value is what brought people in. So I thought, well, I'm not going to do the whole lazy tutorial thing, but how can I make these videos just more entertaining? What can I do? What would I like to create? And I always came back to, well, I would like to do it as like a story. I like to tell stories. That's my thing. So that's the avenue I went down, and it worked for me. Like, it worked really well. The first videos that I did in that style took off. My biggest video was the second video I ever did like that. So you don't have to sacrifice what you want to create. It's just figuring out how to put it in a form where something like YouTube will package it and be okay with it.
Yeah.
And then they'll be willing to take that and go, oh, okay, we can do something with this.
That's exactly what I just figured out from my latest video. My latest video seems to be doing pretty well.
That was awesome. I keep checking in on that video to see how it's doing.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. That was that's exactly what I kind of want to be doing. And it took Sharon holding up a mirror to me to make me realize it, and he really did. And he was basically like, he's like, dude, you're being lazy. He's like, and I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm making like Twinkies and ho-hos and ding-dongs and crap like that nobody really cares about. And going after like low-hanging fruit. Let me flex a little bit, and I did, and I was like, it just making that video is so much more enjoyable for me, and I think it's, it seems to be doing a lot better than all of my other videos. So I mean, it's on a good trajectory, and I'm like, I just want to keep doing that stuff because it's and I've brought in Patreons too, and I'm like, this is great. Like, I'll just keep doing that because I like doing that. I like mixing the software. That's why, one of the biggest reasons I changed from Blender Binge to Kev Binge, because I'm like, I had to stick with Binge because it just sticks. But that's it. Like, I can branch out and I can do that stuff. So I feel like now I can do more of what I want to do, and I can branch out into all these different directions. But I figured out the video style that I want to go with, and I don't know that the next one I do is going to be as successful as this one. I don't know, but at least it's more enjoyable for me, and I can show a lot more stuff. And I'm not going to do it like in a super fast way. I'll do it like in a time efficient way, so somebody's not bored watching the video. But at the same time, it's like, I can't do those like fast, quick videos like Ian does. It just doesn't work for me.
As a viewer and as an audience member, something that I think has been huge for me in deciding whether or not I hit the subscribe button, whether I like a video, whether I come back to something, is the personality. And I think Curtis, you talked about this in your last episode of your podcast, where you were saying that not necessarily in this context, but when you're watching somebody or following somebody online, you kind of get a sense, if you watch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 videos of theirs, of what their personality might be like, and like what sort of jokes that person would make, what their humor is like, what sort of jokes you could make around, and determine, whether you'd want to have like a coffee or a beer with this person if you get on with them. Yeah. And they're fun. And I find that that's really true of all of your videos. Like the recent video that Ellie put out, because I know them, like I know that that's their personality, and it's really true to the content that they would make. The Coded's video on the cyberpunk girl as well. Like, I love the joke that you made about the it took me a really long time to get the hair right, so you're gonna watch it with me, and you're gonna sit and watch it with me. Like, I've known Rob for like less than a year, but I'm like, that's a Rob joke right there. That's Rob humor. Not to mention like Kev's video of the I forget exactly what you called it, and I don't want to say danger swings monster. Danger swings. And all the humor packed in that one. So it's it's going to sound really cheesy, but I think that the best way to get like true engagement and real like organic growth and reach out to people that are part of your tribe or your audience or what have you is to just be yourself.
Be
Because
yourself.
people will see that and they will know when you're putting something on. Like it's incredibly obvious. And I think that's key to like Mr. Beast, Ian, Curtis, The Coded, Kev, Ellie, like everyone who's like involved in the sphere or anyone that you might be watching or subscribe to. That's like part of what makes them interesting, that what makes you want to continue following that person and following that pursuit is that they're them. Because even if they weren't following the like yellow text thing or whatnot, you're still attached to that personality and to that person. And so I think that's like huge before all of the other algorithm savviness that you might want to have is just like be yourself.
Yeah.
Because you can definitely tell in the videos and like I've gone back and obviously watched all of your older videos and it's really cool to just watch you all kind of loosen up a bit.
Yeah.
And kind of like let's see into, this is why I'm just gonna make this joke about whatever because it came to mind in this moment, or I'm gonna have you watch this damn time lapse because it took me a long time to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. My first takes have no jokes at all. I do those videos over and over again. Like I don't script them, but I kind of have notes going through, and I know that I have to try and time up what I'm saying to roughly what's in the video. I haven't edited it down yet, so it's like 10 hours or whatever, but I know roughly the order it has to be in. But I end up getting to the point where I'm so sick of like stumbling over words and retaking things. I just do one more take at the end where I'm like, right, screw it. This is the one. Let's just do this now. And I do it pretty much just all in one take. And that's when the jokes come in because I don't care anymore. I know I have other good takes in the bag, so I don't really care about just kind of improvising around it.
It might be like cliche at this point in like social media history, but we've all heard the phrase 1,000 true fans. And today it kind of seems like 1,000 is nothing. Like if you have 1,000 followers or whatever, like you're not even famous. But if you have 1,000 patrons and each of those, say 1,000 patrons at like the $10 tier or 1,000 patrons even at the $1 tier, like that's definitely enough to pay rent,
Yes.
barely will almost pay rent in Boston, the most expensive state to live in. And you have people who will follow you no matter where you go, like the folks on Curtis's Discord are just jumping into the Holtcast, and it's easy. I feel like it's easy to forget that. I've only posted, one video on YouTube, so I'm no queen. But I got my second patron this week, and they sent me a message saying, I'm just here to support your work. I saw you on BlenderNest. I was also a baker in Boston, and this person also has a Patreon. And it was just a really nice message about like, don't let it stress you out and continue doing the work you love. Don't think you have to be somebody else to be successful. It's kind of cliche, but true.
It's very true. Yeah, about like the point of people following you around. When I put out my latest podcast episode on YouTube, I thought, well, I was very anxious before doing it because I was like, okay, this is the first step into the let's stop caring about the algorithm territory. Because it's like, okay, well, it's a podcast. Like, no one's going to watch it other than people that really want to watch it. And I had redone all the thumbnails to make them boring but consistent. And I was like, look, boring thumbnail, podcast, the only people that are going to watch this are the ones that are going to be genuinely interested in clicking on it. Like, so I was like, this will be interesting. So let's see how many people actually do it. Of course, it was the worst performing video, but I think it was like 400 and something in a day. I was like, okay, well, compared to 70,000 subs, it's nothing. But I was like, so there are 400 and something people that are interested enough to click on the most boring thing I could produce. And I thought, when you think about it that way, that's actually pretty cool. So, yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
I was like, 400 something is a good starting point for the most boring content. If you're already at the bottom, you can only work your way up, right?
The bottom is a trustworthy rock.
Michael, you been all right?
Yes, I'm good, thank you.
Good.
I've only got like 15 or 20 minutes or something, and then I've got to dash off again.
Okay. What have you been working on recently?
What have I been working on? A course.
Nice.
Yeah, the main stuff I do in the background. I'm going to release the first section of the course, totally free, because it's one of those. They're videos that I think are valuable to everybody, and they're very low level stuff. Catering for the I've just installed Blender for the very first time help. So I'm hoping that people will just, instead of berating them on the forums, going, "Oh, you know, all the stuff that comes with I'm new, please help." It's like, here you go, here's a video. It's really basic. It's like how to install Blender.
Yeah.
And a few more things on from there, and hopefully that'll give people to have a bit more confidence. That's the real big thing.
Yeah.
A bit of confidence and able to just crack on and start using Blender, rather than, is my computer fast enough, and all the other beginner questions, which are often just questions that I'm scared to start. Is my computer fast enough? It's like, just install Blender. I don't care if it's Blender 2.6. Just 2.79. I said this in a recent video, that you can still produce beautiful work with Blender 2.79. You just have to look at the show reel back then, and I'm just like, well, you don't need all this fancy new stuff. So if you have got a computer that's too old to run Blender 2.8 onwards, just run Blender 2.79 until you've got a computer that can run Blender 2.8. You can still do fabulous work.
True.
Where can people find this when it's out, Michael?
They'll be on my channel specifically when it's out, and I'll also obviously the rest of the course will follow on from that. And if people just want to learn from YouTube, great. If they want to go to a course, great. I always encourage people to try, and it may not be the best business sense. No, I'm the best. Come see me. Now, but learn from the person you like learning from. My teaching style's not for everybody. I like explaining things. Some people just I want to know what to click and just move on.
Yeah.
But my experience tells me that complete beginners don't tend to favor bash through unless they're already familiar with 3D software. That's often the case. If they come from Cinema 4D or Maya or something, then they just want to know how the program works. They know about topology. They know about, you say subdivision surface modifier. They're like, oh yeah, subsurf, off we go.
Yeah.
But if you're brand new to the platform, I think, anyway, that's the feedback I've got, that the way that I explain things often comes across to experienced people as and beginners as, thank you for explaining it, I got it. So that's always good to hear.
There is a market for all the different types of ways to explain stuff, because the vast majority of people that try Blender give up on it, I think. They're just the same with anything, like any skill or any piece of software or whatever. You touch it, you open it, you close it. So
I was like that the first time I opened Blender. I was like, what? Right clicks, I'm out of here.
So exactly. I think people think that the beginner thing is way oversaturated and already done, and sure, to a certain degree it has been, with way too many tutorials. Donuts. But I think the point is, there are so many people that still don't stick with Blender from the beginning, that there's beginning content, and I think there's still a market for that. So
not only just watching different people and seeing what teaching style you like, but also just doing a load of beginner things helps solidify the knowledge. You don't learn to extrude once. You don't learn to scale and use your transform tools once. If you do it again and again and again, it helps solidify that knowledge. And it's even better if you can do it with a couple of different projects.
And those are sort of things that are really great to look for as well if you're looking to get in on something that's relatively new. I know that in my case specifically, back in November, when I started November, I watched one of Arendale's videos in which they start the video with saying, okay, I'm going to teach you how to do exactly those operations: move, rotate, and scale. And, I hadn't had that much Blender under my belt by then, but just hearing that these operations that were relatively ingrained in me already, I was going to learn how to do, but in a different context, in this case, vector displacement.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, great, I'm in. That's exactly what I need, because then I can just build on top of that with anything else that I might be able to absorb from this video. One thing that one thing that a lot of people I think get confused about or just don't want to accept, and I know this because I know a lot of people that are incredible in their fields. Like think about programmers that I know that to this day have to Google really simple things, and that's really hard to get over because I feel like there's this element of pride in it that's just like I should remember this, I should know this. But independent of whatever it is that you're doing in life, you're going to have to seek the reference, whether that's Google or an actual encyclopedia. There's no way that you can store all of that in your brain. And if you can, like, great, but the rest of us will have to type into Google how to scale in Blender, how to apply scale in Blender, how to do this and that, and that's totally fine. Yeah. And like when people review this in videos, because I'm like, I can't think of a specific one in mind, but I know a lot of your videos will say, these basic operations. Like I guess now I'm thinking of Infenzia's E to extrude, S to scale, E to extrude. Yeah. Yes. So these sort of rote repetition things are actually incredibly helpful because if you didn't know it, then you've heard it, and if you did know it, then it's just further reinforced in your memory. And so like every now and then it's great to just go back and watch beginner content because you might pick up on something just like in reading a book for the second time that you didn't catch the first time around.
I've had that with experienced people who have looked at the video because I often get people to eyeball them for glaring mistakes or me saying over on the left-hand side of the screen when I've moved my mouse over to the right like a numpty. And they say, oh, I didn't know about that little thing because you're in the midst of explaining it. You kind of do a little deep dive into that one specific thing. They're like, oh, alternate. That gives me so many extra options for extrude that I didn't even know were there. Yep. And you're right, totally right about seeking documentation. I have to do it if I'm doing anything with the Blender API with Python. I'm just in that document. I'm all the time. It's just open, and I'm like, how do I do this? How do I do that? And I know like what I'm coding. I just don't know what I'm supposed to be typing because it's the Blender API. And until you actually go in and you perhaps done it 50 times, you're like, okay, I need bpy.ops. And off you go.
Even I admit to having so many tabs open when I'm doing anything code-wise, just looking it all up. And like occasionally, and it is quite rare, like you'll come up with an idea and you'll write it down and then you'll run it, and like 9 out of 10 times something doesn't work, but when it does, it's like the biggest dopamine hit because you're like, yes, from memory it works. But that almost never happens. Like you got to be realistic.
Yep.
If I'm being stubborn, I'm like, come on, brain. I just wasted half an hour of my day when I could have just looked it up in 30 seconds and got the answer.
Exactly.
And there's part of that that's I'm trying to learn a skill here, so I should try and ingrain it. But there's no shame in just looking up what the function call was or whatever it happens to be in order to just get the thing you're trying to do done. Because if I'm trying to do something, I'm not trying to learn. I try and keep those things exclusive from one another. You know, if I'm sat down and I'm learning how to do something very specific, I'm all in there. But if I'm just trying to do something, I'm like, E to extrude, S to scale. I use the tools that I know.
Yeah, and from like a neurological and psychological perspective as well, I think Elon Musk mentioned it at one point, but we're basically already cyborgs. Because like how technology is already an extension to your body, like your phone and that.
Yeah.
Because
it's a tertiary system.
Yeah, exactly. Because your memory works by like linking to other memories and other things and like just neural pathways and whatever. But and it's weird how the brain is so plastic in the way that when people lose some of their senses, other senses occupy that part of the brain. Like I think in the neocortex specifically, like we're very good at like pattern recognition and building up patterns. And using a search engine is a pattern to like receive information. It's like an extension to your memory. You're just following a pathway to access more info. So it's like I guess like people are studying this, but it's like the use of search engines is an extension to our brains now. Like there's a part of your brain that's literally just like grown to be, hey, once we receive a request, we're going to go and look something up.
There's no need to remember information if it's already out there. There's a Sherlock Holmes book, I can't remember which one, where Watson mentions something about the Earth going around the sun, and he's really surprised because Sherlock Holmes doesn't know that. And he's saying, like, I have no reason to know that information. Now that I do know it, I'm going to try my best to forget it. Because if I ever did need to know that, I could easily find that out. That's in a book somewhere. I don't need to know this off the top of my head. It's not important information for my job. I watch my own videos at least once a week. I'll think, oh, I don't remember how I did whatever, and I'll quickly go back and watch something I made because I know I've done it before, and I know the explanation in there is going to be something I'll understand because I said it. Every single time I do any sort of tracking, I watch a CJ Matter video, the same one, because I'm like, I always forget the shortcuts, and I know that it's straight to the point. And I know that once I've watched that video, I will know how to do it because I always do.
That's so trippy. Like, in order to remember the shortcut, you know, like the shortest path to find the shortcut. And the shortest path is the video that you already made.
Yep.
That's so trippy. And the thing about memory is, like, when you remember something, you don't remember, like, you don't just remember it. Your brain recalls the last time you remembered it.
Yeah.
So it's like the last time you Googled it. I find myself all the time with Blender, like Googling something, and then there's all the recommended Googles, recommended phrases, and then selecting one. But also separately, like memory. So, like in Greek mythology, memory, the goddess, has 9 daughters, one of which is Cleo, and Cleo means culture. So there's like a really intimate relationship between memory and culture. And in the context of Blender and the internet and how our brains are changing, how we're evolving to be more like cyborgs. And I think like the culture of Blender, like memes and stuff, like requires you to have remembered some basic Blender stuff in order to engage with that kind of content.
The classic one is, of course, delete the cube, add the cube.
Yeah,
everyone does that. Well, unless you save your startup scene so you don't have a default cube, which is what I do.
Does anyone else have, just about the point of memory, there's something weird I've been doing for most of my life that occasionally I think back to, where I have like a string of memories that I've tried to string together. Let me try and explain. So I remember being really young in primary school on a summer holiday, sitting in a house that's owned by a family member and kind of like looking at a doorway and a window, and it's just like it's a very vivid picture in my head. Before and after that picture I don't remember, but I remember just that moment. And then when I've recalled that in the future, there have been times where me sitting there recalling it has made another vivid image, and that's kind of connected. So I remember that one and then the next one, and I've tried to add more to it, but most of them have faded away. But I've got three of those moments which I can recall perfectly. One of them is that first image. One of them is me sitting by a computer in secondary school putting a USB stick in a computer, and the next one is me in Florida. So like every time I've tried to add one, most of the time it fails, but sometimes one sticks really well.
This is definitely going to be number 4 in the chain.
Maybe.
Time you spoke about it on a podcast. Because every time you watch this video, it'll come back to you.
Well, emotion has so much to do with memory, right? Because if you're feeling something strong when you're remembering it, then it sticks. So maybe it will. Probably not. We'll see. I've had a bit to drink, so that messes with memory as well. So, but one day there will be another one. I bet if you sat there and like tried to feel stuff and actually like thought about it, you probably could. But this probably sounds crazy, but I bet there's someone out there that's got something similar.
Memory is recall. Like to some degree, that's what I wanted to study growing up, neuroscience. I then diverged from that role, but some of it stuck, and just like memory is just it's not actually remembering that specific moment. It's remembering the last time that you remember that moment.
Yeah.
And so every time that you do that, it strengthens it. And I definitely have moments where I'm just like, I vividly remember being in this one place with this person, but what was I doing before that? And then 3 months or 3 years later, I'll be like, I was at this place with this person, and then it led up to me being here, and so it just filled in the gaps in the puzzle of that like missing memory. But it's kind of like almost impossible to do if I'm actually sitting down actively thinking about trying to piece the pieces back together, because they're kind of going back to the emotion point. There's so many different feelings involved that unless I feel that like fear, joy, whatever it was I was feeling that moment again physically in my body, I won't go back to when was the last time that I felt this sensation physically.
Another thing, like recently I've been getting random footage of me playing games and making things, but I haven't been recording the audio because I won't need it. But sometimes I go back and have a look at that footage just out of interest to see. And when I'm watching it back, I can remember what music I was listening to at different phases of that recording. Sometimes it's hours long, But I like it had surprised me because I've been watching it thinking, how do I remember what song it was? And then I realized, like, when you're playing a video game, for example, because I mean, some people get moved by music and some people don't really, like, but I feel like I do. So when I'm listening to it, it's kind of stirring up like a mild set of emotions, and your attention is like really fixed on the game, and it's almost like it's kind of codifying that feeling to that visual moment. So I guess when I watch it back, you can kind of like recall that feeling, and it attaches it to the music in some way. That probably won't last forever. I'll probably forget about it a little while down the line, but I thought it's very interesting that, like, you don't need all the sensory information there. You can recall what else was missing, just like if it's recent enough or if it was strong enough.
I've had a number of different songs as my alarms, and recently I listened to Strobe by deadmau5, or deadmau5, how some people pronounce it, for the first time in maybe 6 years. And that used to be my alarm for a long time. It's like a 10-minute song. But as soon as I heard it again, I just remembered what it felt like to wake up to that song and get ready and like follow the buildup of the song with how ready I was to go do whatever it was that I was doing, because it was my alarm for so long. And similarly, like one of the first iPhone alarms, anytime I hear it out in the wild, it just evokes this like in me of like, I need to do something right now. That's just, like, very, very weird, because it transcends like the specific moment in time in which I listen to it, and just immediately harks back to, I was in 6th grade getting ready for like this day of class, and I hadn't yet done my chemistry homework and whatnot, and like so and so was on my, so it's really part of the beauty of the experience of being alive.
I love this conversation.
Like, Take on Me reminds me of 3rd grade.
Sometimes I listen back to music that like I haven't heard in years, and like when you think back to like you in school, you think, oh yeah, that was a bit of a cringy time, like it was bad, you felt things, but you can't really remember what it felt like. And then occasionally I'll find a song that I haven't listened to since then, and then I listen to it, and it's like opening a doorway into the past very briefly.
Yep.
And suddenly, like, you feel things that you forgot what it was like. But then the really sad thing about that, like as Eddie was saying, like you remember the time you remembered something, that the more you listen to it, it fades away. And I'm like, damn, that's kind of upsetting in a way.
It's true, very true. The more you listen to it, it fades. That's why there's certain songs and certain artists I won't listen to unless I want to trigger that memory.
Yeah, so I'm really hoping that I haven't exhausted that supply. Like, there needs to be more people.
Yeah.
Like, I think Linkin Park, I think there's a bunch of songs that they've done that, like, I remember listening to, and I'm trying not to over-listen to it, because I'm like, okay, well, that's the connection to the past. Let's treat that with some respect,
Yep.
For me, it's the Daft Punk Tron album. Triggers back a lot of great memories.
Oh, I listen to that so much.
I won't listen to it unless I really need it.
It's so unique as well. It's so unique.
Yep.
Whenever I'm in the car, I try and just put on a random mix on YouTube. They call it like a super mix. It just plays random songs. And on my way dropping children off today, Nickelback came on. How You Remind Me. I was
my God.
Like you were saying, I've not heard this since I was at a party. Like,
and that's a good thing.
Like 20 years, it is. It took me back to that moment. I was like, yeah, that's not a good memory, but
that song was just played constantly on like Kerrang and MTV2 and stuff. That was in constant rotation. It was that and that Avril Lavigne and probably something else was just the only songs they had. It was like just keep playing them.
There was a song, Boulevard of Broken Dreams. Does anyone remember that one?
Was that Green Day?
Yeah. It was like the
only one that I have ever known.
The really emo one.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Like, I took a trip to Spain, and it was such a great trip. And I heard a song that was very popular at the time from Laura Pausini. It was Entre tu y mil mares. And I was like, I had no idea what the song was or who sang it, but I remembered enough of it that when I got back to the States, I was able to like find it. And I found it within like 20 minutes. I was surprised. I was shocked that I could find it. And I only listened to that song when I'm like looking at the pictures I took from like, from that trip. And it was just, it brings me like right back there. It's amazing.
It's a time machine, an auditory time machine. Yeah. It's great. Like tools like SoundHound and the like, where you could
I
be
know.
tone deaf as all hell, and then
Yup.
sing a song to the app, and it will tell you it might be this song, and most of the time be right. So useful for
Yeah, it's
that.
awesome.
I've been so surprised with the other apps as well. Is it Shazam that does it?
Yeah,
To
Shazam.
listen? Where like it doesn't need to listen for that long. It's just like, yeah, boop, got it, and you're like, wait, hold on, how did you manage to
I know.
get it for like a bit
Yeah.
of not like? It's crazy. I guess it's to do with indexing, like indexing audio, like
Yeah.
how search engines work really quickly.
Mhm.
I assume they'll probably listen to the tempo or something first, and they'll go, well, there's only this many songs that have that tempo. So that
Yeah.
rounds it down to like whatever, and then it'll just keep going through filters until it probably like a heuristic algorithm or something
Yeah.
to figure out what it probably is.
Also, there's all like background noise as well, like when you're recording.
Yeah.
So it's
I know.
crazy.
It's always been good. I remember when Shazam first came out, and I downloaded the app and I hadn't tried it yet. And I was in a nightclub, and I tried it and it worked straight away. I was like, "Oh, this is a game changer. this is a big deal for me." This because
Yeah.
I spent so long the next day trying to remember the lyrics to a song I heard the night before when I was drunk or whatever.
I used it recently. You know that new song? Is it "Blinding Lights" by The Weeknd? I think that's been like on radio quite a
Very
lot.
80s, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And I was
Yeah.
I can't remember where I was, but I was outside somewhere, and I heard it, and I thought I like the sound of that synth in it. And I'm not into like modern popular music. I don't listen to radios or anything. That's the only time I used it recently. I just hit it up, and then it came on. I was like, well, that's cool. It's just like grabbing something out of midair, and now it's yours.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love it.
Yeah. They integrated Shazam into Siri, so now you can just ask, "Hey, what song is this?" And then she'll, or the voice assistant will tell you, "Oh, let me listen." And then just like Curtis said, 2 seconds later, you can have the song. And it's I used to do this before knowing about Shazam and SoundHound. I would just feverishly write down the lyrics to songs that I like on a note on my phone. Just be like, "Oh, they said this, that, and I think it's this." And it's
Yeah.
awful if you can't hear the song. Or I would try to remember it and then just ask my friend, like, "Hey, do you know the song that goes like da 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 da?" And then be like, no." But
Yeah.
SoundHound understands me. They know I want the Boulevard
Yeah.
of Broken Dreams.
Yes.
Yeah, so many times just written random lyrics into Google that just sound like someone's had a stroke and they're writing something weird into the search bar, but like it works. I love it when you get those lyric websites. The lyric websites are like the unsung heroes of the internet.
Yes,
They really are.
Genius is literally genius. Lyric
Yeah.
website. If you don't know it, it's a website where you can look up lyrics to your some of your favorite artists, and then it will tell you. It's kind of like a crowdsourced, this is what that line means, and sometimes it'll have references to the artist themselves saying, yes, this is what I meant when I wrote that line. And so if you're the type that likes to really interpret lyrics or kind of try to get into the substance of it, if you're following an artist, it's a great resource for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen that before. There's a lot of rappers who go on there and post what
Yep.
they actually meant about the lyrics and stuff. That's quite cool.
Skidoo-doo-pop-pop. Boom.
It's called Genius.
Genius.
Genius, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. I learned new
It's
stuff.
like footnotes for rap.
Yes.
Really,
Mm.
that's awesome. I gotta
Um,
check that out.
They have a YouTube channel as well, don't they? It was
Mhm.
very heavily memed. I love
Wow. Oh, I'm totally getting back into it, man. Like I was looking up some. Like I was like, hey, I wonder what the band Lit is doing. I don't know if you guys ever remember that band Lit.
it.
They had like 2 songs that got really popular. Anyway, they released an album like in 2018 that I totally missed, and it's actually a country album. They went country, and I was like, what? But it was actually really good because I'm not really into country music at all. But the actual music was good. It was a melody. It was catchy. It was really fun, and like then I started like because it would I had it on YouTube and it would play like their older stuff, and it just started tripping all these memories from like when I was like my prime age, which was 27, which I'm still 27. Still, I'll always be. And it was
It's like
awesome.
an acid retrip.
Yeah, it really was. It was great.
Kev, when you talk about age, you're making me feel bad because it's my 25th birthday on the 12th of Feb, so it's coming up. Being halfway through my 20s is a scary thing because for me, I felt like I've how do I put it? Like I quick saved life, and I was like, all right, I'll be back in a minute. I'm just gonna go and set myself up with work, and then I'll come back. But that's not how life works because all that time spent is all like getting older. So I'm halfway through my 20s.
I'll say this: 25 hit me like a ton of bricks. I don't know why, but it hit out of every age that I've ever hit. 25 was like probably the worst, and I have no idea why, because it's so young. I was like, what? Why is this hitting? You know, when I was 25, I was like, oh my god, 25, no, I'm adult, and people have to take me seriously. I'm like, I don't get it, because I hit 30, and I was like, oh, this is no big deal, it's just 30, right? 40 hit me. 40 hit me a little bit worse, because it's like, oh god, I'm an adult now. Like, now I can't screw up anymore because I can't get away with being young. It's like I can't I can't use that excuse anymore. Oh, I'm just young, I'm learning. No, it's like I'm like in the middle, so I have to own it all now.
Also, like 40 is like the number that I associate with parents, just generally.
Yes.
For some reason, that's the parent number right there. So I think I get the feeling.
When I got out of college, I went into an office to work, and it wasn't like a sexy industry. It was like pharmaceutical back end stuff, and I was so depressed because I was there with 40-year-olds, and I knew they were all in their 40s, and I was like, this is the rest of my life. I'm going to be hanging out with 40-year-olds. They're so old, and like I was all bummed out, and now I'm one of them, and I'm like, Jesus, I don't feel it. So now I'm thinking, like, they always seemed so much older to me, and maybe it's because they were behaving like, you know, responsible adults or something. And it's like, yeah, but you could like behave like a responsible adult, and you could still like party like a kid. Like it doesn't. You compartmentalize. That's what being an adult is about, right? So it's like, I realize now, I was like, I was wrong. Like age really is just a number. It really is. Like your body's gonna start like falling apart. It just happens to everyone. It's just natural, right? But like your mind doesn't stop. Like you're who you are, your attitude. Like you don't have to act like a crotchety old person. You just don't. You can be chill. You can listen to like new music. Like I listen to new music all the time. I'm always finding new bands and new stuff that I like, because I'm like, this is, you know, keeps it fresh. Some guys that get locked on, you know, play Skinner, man, play Leonard Skinner. This doesn't sound like Leonard Skinner. I'm like, well, you already died like 20 years ago. Like you just died. You chose to die. Like, you know, experience life as it's moving. There's so much cool stuff. There's so much new stuff. And like, yeah, a lot of the new stuff's derivative, but who cares? It's like, it's a new spin on older stuff. Now I'm psyched to listen to that. What was that? What was that band you just mentioned? Bright
Weekend?
Oh, The Weekend. Yeah.
The Weekend. All right, so I'm going to check them out now. I haven't heard of that them.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to check them out.
The diversity in age is probably one of my favorite things about the Blender community. Like sometimes you hear older creators talking about how like so and so is like 14, you know, making incredible stuff. It's like the next wave, you know. It's like the next wave of like human consciousness, human knowledge. Like we're all kind of in it together.
We are in
and
it
if we
together.
can exchange across ages, like we're all the better for it. Yeah, I think like Blender is so diverse, like in terms of age and geography. I like that.
Yeah,
I was on that note. I was really shocked when I found out. I used to belong to the. I mean, I still kind of do. I just haven't been there forever. The Lightwave user group. Lightwave is another 3D application. It's really awesome. It's been used on like, if you've watched like Star Trek Enterprise or Voyager, a lot of the visual effects in those shows, like now they're kind of dated, but those shows were like heavily done in Lightwave, and it was just, it's still such an amazing application. And I was shocked to find out that Dick Van Dyke used to go to the Lightwave meetings here in LA. Like, yeah, he since hasn't, but yeah, and I was like, that guy, he's like in his like mid to late 80s now, and was using Lightwave to do dance routines. Like, so he was animating, and I was shocked to find that out. I'm like, here's a guy, you know, who's already had an amazing career. You know, just super cool guy. Like everyone sung his praises because it was really nice. And it was just like,
Van Dyke?
Who's Dick Van Dyke? Have you seen? Yeah. Okay, perfect. Have you seen Mary Poppins, the original?
Michael just cringed so hard.
Hello, Governor. Have you seen?
Oh no, someone did it.
Have you seen Mary Poppins? Have you seen Mary Poppins, Ellie?
Yeah, he was Bert in Mary Poppins.
So you know the guy that Mary Poppins knows, the guy who's like doing the chalk drawings.
Chimney.
Yeah, Chimney.
Yes. Chimney.
Yeah,
that guy.
That's Dick Van Dyke.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's Dick Van Dyke. So he has had an amazing career. I mean, super
Yeah.
successful,
He really
and
has.
later in life was picking up 3D animation. And I'm like, this
Yeah,
is
that's cool.
amazing. So he would have been learning it at the same time that 14-year-old would have been learning it. So it's like a whole dichotomy of like human existence and like all just tackling new technology at the same time. And it's just a beautiful thing on how all these different minds like work together.
Yeah.
And it's phenomenal.
You mentioned Lightwave there. That was my first 3D program. And
Nice.
I was like, how do they make the visuals in Voyager? Because I was loving Voyager at the time, and I discovered it was Lightwave, and I didn't have thousands of dollars, so I might have found a copy, as one does. And I was just like, wow, this is capable of so much. And then, like, I was young, so I was like, oh, squirrel, and off I went with
Yeah.
somewhere else. And then I had I can't remember what it's called now. SolidWorks, I think it is. It's like a cut down version of Pro Engineer. And then I got into that, and then it disappeared again. And then I found SketchUp when it was still owned by Google, I think it was. And then that disappeared again. And then I found Blender, and then I kind of was in a toss up between Blender and SketchUp, because SketchUp was so easy to start. Like, oh, I just want to make my room real quick. And it was with the subtractive modeling, you know, the way that the Boolean operations now actually work in Blender. SketchUp was doing that ages ago, and I was like, and it was doing it so well. I was like, I don't know which one to choose, and ultimately I picked Blender. But I still use SketchUp if I need to mock up a room real quick. I just find it so easy to just go bam, done.
It was really fun. I remember for some reason I have a memory being in my nan's house, and they were showing SketchUp on the news, I think, because they were like, this is like it's a new revolutionary thing to help with like architecture and all of this. And I remember trying it out when it first came out, you know, with the really old interface and like kind of crummy looking buttons. But like being able just to draw boxes and lines and pull things up was crazy. It was just like sod geometry. Let's just make stuff.
You know, but you bounce through different software as you move. Like I started with TrueSpace because I found a book like in some like used bookstore in like Princeton, New Jersey, and I was like, this is kind of cool, and I bought it for like $5, and it had a version of TrueSpace on a CD-ROM, and I loaded it up and I was playing with it, and then I bounced to Lightwave because I just found that I really liked it, and I was teaching at the time, I think, and I got an educational discount on it, and then I just like, no, actually I didn't get an educational discount on that one. I just bought that one flat out because I got a deal for like $600 or something, and I picked up Digital Fusion with it, which is now part of DaVinci. And it was just, you know, just iterative through there. I went to XSI, Softimage, and then Maya, and then Houdini and Blender, and just all mixed in together. But you'll bounce and you'll learn, and you pick up different things and different techniques in certain software. Like Lightwave had one of the coolest workflows, and I used that workflow. Like I just actually mentioned I think I mentioned William Vaughn in my last video, and I just he actually commented, you know, on my video. He found it and commented, and we reconnected. But he taught me like in 2 hours sitting with this guy, revolutionized my workflow. He taught me like subdivision modeling in Lightwave, and like I take it through to every software that allows that. I was doing it in Maya. I do it in Houdini. I certainly do it in Blender. And it's just like the subdivision workflow is just so easy for me to just like crank out base meshes really quickly, and then just go in and sculpt whatever else I have to do. And he had it nailed down back in 2002. Just amazing workflow he had for these really cool characters he was doing, and it just man, it just like, I mean, 2 hours with this one guy just like revolutionized my entire workflow. It made me a much better artist.
It's really curious to think like where things are headed now that, you know, kind of just slightly bring it back to the age thing, because we were watching Punisher, or like Clint from Quarter Cruise live stream yesterday, and there's a guy on there, William Landgren, who's this wizard, kind of like Gabe type wizard, doing amazing 3D stuff. And like I think back of, you know, when I was like 14 or even before that, it's like one of my first entries into digital self-expression was Microsoft Paint. That's what I started with, but now we have kids that are like younger than that, starting on Blender, which is, you know, leagues removed from a Microsoft Paint because it's, you know, it's 3D. And so, like, what's next? I'm 26 now. I'll be kind of like Curtis. I don't know if you're an Aquarius, but because I don't know about that stuff. But I'm
Yep.
Feb 18th, so we're right up
Oh,
there.
man,
Like
yeah.
I'll be
Aquarius
27
Club.
soon. Woo, woo, woo.
That's
And I just, like this always trips me up. Like VR headsets weren't a thing when I was growing up, but now it's like, one of those just like, oh, you didn't have a VR headset? And, it's like, I definitely did it when I was growing up. I do now, and I'm really psyched with it. But kids that are, a lot younger than me are starting out with this as their base tool of digital self-expression. So it's really curious and really exciting to see like how people will be able to create and just start, like my first Microsoft Paint sketches weren't anything to write home about, but it was better than having like a pen, crayon, and like paper is exhaustible. Like save files on a floppy disk are as well to some degree, but not as much, right? And they're not nearly as expensive. And so, like with things like Sketchfab, people are going to be able to upload their creations when they were like 14 and see that progression of like, this was my artwork when I was 14 and I was doing stuff in VR. I was modeling in VR and texturing in VR. And it's like, what's next? It's really, really exciting space to be in.
I've got to dash, but if you want to look it up, Deluxe Paint 2 on the Amiga 500.
Oh my gosh! Wow!
My first artwork on a dot matrix or matrix printer. I was like,
wow. Yep. I almost bought an Amiga. I bought a Commodore 128 at the time, and I kicked myself for not buying that Amiga because Lightwave ran on the Amiga. Video Toaster, Lightwave, that was all Amiga. And it was just amazing stuff. Yeah, and Deluxe Paint was one of them.
They were so much better than PCs were for quite a few generations because they had things like dedicated graphics.
Yeah,
so they could do 3D stuff, and PCs were a bit rubbish at it. But
they were. Yeah, the Amigas were phenomenal.
Owned. Yeah. Anyway, guys, I've got a dash.
See you, Mike.
See you, Mike.
Now that you mentioned about like technology changing, I remember. Even just like basic schoolwork when I was in primary school, because the computers were like the off-white, very big, boxy kind of desktops. It was like, okay, well, we're going to do an essay about history. You have to do it on paper, make sure it's all all clean. You can cut out things and put it on, make sure your writing is perfect. And because I think I was just at the end of the period where you do all your work on paper. And then when it got over to secondary school, then it's like, okay, do all your essays on computer, just print it up. That's easier. I remember like the smell of the paper I would use, and I had like all the glue sticks and whatever. And even though it was like using the kind of stuff that kids in play school use now just for having fun, it was like, okay, you're going to use that to make something that looks professional, but not anymore. So it's weird thinking back about how even little things like that have changed.
Yeah.
I was in that horrible transition period where they were trying to bring computers into school. But all the software sucked and all the hardware sucked. So they were like, oh, it's the future. The kids have to use this, but it was terrible. Yeah. It wasn't up to scratch yet. We had like these interactive whiteboards that were just unbelievably bad. Like the tracking would always start to drift on them. So they were trying to draw on the board, but then like 'cause it was the first generation, like by the time they got to the end of the screen, it would be just nowhere near where the hand was. We had these stupid like exam preparation programs that had all the wrong information in them. And you would answer a question right and it would say you were wrong. And I was like, oh man, I'd much rather just go back to textbooks.
We had an Apple IIe lab in my elementary school. It was the only classroom with air conditioning. And you used to go in there and it was like freezing cold and they just kept it running. And it was like all these Apple IIes. And all we did was just like, basic command line stuff. It was even college, like freshman in college, it was all just command line stuff. That was like the web didn't exist yet. It was like, I think the web really came in my junior year, I think. And then from there it just took off. That was like the .com burst.
When I left primary school, there was the age where I think Microsoft Word had like kind of hit the peak of its fashion, and everyone was using like those template font things. Those template titles, because I think that was a new thing then. So it was everywhere. All of those weird, really cringy looking gradient texts that like just big and chunky and were put on absolutely
the
anything.
Generated text.
Anything and everything. It was,
it was horrible.
Yeah, that's about the time I was in secondary school, so everything was focused on that. Every like handout we got for the GCSEs and stuff was made with that. It was awful. I really want to go back to my old schools and just walk around and just have a look.
Because a lot of them have been like
Mine's been knocked down, thankfully.
Wow. Those memories dead.
Mine's still there.
My the school I went to was terrible. It was falling apart for years. We had a staircase that collapsed, right? And because the school was built originally just as a temporary structure in the 60s, there was loads of asbestos everywhere.
Oh my
But
god.
rather than closing the school or anything like that, they just got some like clear tarpaulin over where the staircase was and just kind of like duct taped around it and went, oh yeah, just stay away from that corridor, that's fine. The windows were all rotten, so in the summer we couldn't open the windows. You had to keep the windows closed, otherwise they would just fall out of the frame.
Oh my God.
We had to do half of our lessons in like mobile trailers, basically, like mobile classrooms. In the car park. I noticed on if you go back on Google Earth, you can still see where some of them were just after I was in school. But I had like half of my GCSEs in a little mobile thing in the car park. After I left, they had to reinforce all of the walls because one of the walls was going to fall down. So I'm not sad at all about the fact my whole school got knocked down.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
my
be.
primary school, I think I know what you mean about the mobile things, because my old primary school, it was like this C-shaped building, and like on the field they had like paved over where there used to be like an air raid shelter for World War II. But like they had a little bit of land around the main building, and they would have these temporary classrooms. Like there'd be like 6 of them like dotted around the land, and they're all gone now. Like they've all been knocked down because clearly they're not supposed to be up for, you know, however many decades. And they've extended the main building to where those things were, so they're more permanent structures. But yeah, that was interesting because they were kind of like these elevated rooms. So there was
it's like on stilts, like a mobile classroom. The sort of thing you would expect them to run like a temporary trade show or something from.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they're made for. Like for a festival to have an office or something like that. That's what they're designed for. They're not supposed to have 30 kids in them for 2 years.
Where was your school?
Northeast England.
Mine was in Southeast London.
I remember those pods.
Mine was in New Jersey.
We call them. I took an FCAT in one of those, which is like the Florida Comprehensive Assessment Test or something.
Yeah.
And there was literally just like a hole in the roof of it. So it was, you know, it was this beautiful kind of like Airbnb type experience where you could sit under the rain while you're taking this comprehensive assessment test if you wanted. And if you were in that seat, and like Curtis said, you know, it's like, these rooms are meant for, or I think it was Rob, it's like 30 people, but, you know, we'd have like 45 students in there all taking a test, and we're all supposed to be quiet while there's like birds literally coming in and it's raining on us. Because, you know, construction needed to be done to cover up some asbestos walls or something. Meanwhile, you've got like VR spaces now.
I know.
Classrooms. It's really, going back to that a bit, it's really exciting to think about how that can shape education and kind of like cross-cultural and cross-person interaction. You know, you don't necessarily need to be in one of those spaces anymore right now to learn something. Like we know this thanks to YouTube, Twitter, and the like, and like things like Clubhouse, where you can jump in on a sort of like this interactive podcast experience of having conversations with people in rooms the way that you would in a physical space, but you don't necessarily need to be there anymore. Zoom calls as well. So it's like, what's next? You know, and kind of going back to the Elon Musk thing, like we are cyborgs already to some degree. So what's the next level going to be like? It's really, really exciting, especially now, like with all this stuff going on about like Dogecoin and GME, like GameStop and the like. What's next in crypto art and what's next in cryptocurrency and decentralized finance? Like, where are we going? To the moon.
Yeah.
That's where.
I know we're going so fast that it comes back to, you know, are humans ready for this? And it's so the change is going to be so fast and so sweeping. It already has. I mean, the pandemic has changed so much, and I think going forward out of this pandemic, I think we're going to realize how much things have changed and how much things stay the same. Like
the number of people that I've overheard, especially because I'm, you know, now in these groups that have said, I didn't have anything really to do, so I picked up Blender during the pandemic alone. Is so staggering, you know, and like Adobe products as well. So it's like going back to like digital self-expression, which is or just self-expression in general, which is something I'm passionate about and have just recently found like the terminology for it. It's so cool to see people that like I've dropped in on some of these rooms and I've overheard people say, I was doing this, that, or the other, completely unrelated to Blender. And then obviously, like, I'm stuck at home for a long time, and like YouTube is recommending me these things, or like so and so said that this was a cool tool, and now I'm taking my art and either making it from 2D to 3D, or doing this, that, and the other, and like doing animations, and it's free, it's accessible, it's like easy to download. There's a wealth of knowledge online on the internet for me to pick up and learn how to do the things that I want to do. So it's only going to make people, creatives, artists, stronger and more conversational after the fact, if it hasn't already, because it's accessible. I think that's a huge thing as well. Whoa, who's that?
I've got a cameo.
Oh, she's jumping. Say hello.
Aww.
Say hello.
Yes.
1 million.
She doesn't want to be
views.
here.
Yeah, I was about to say this is going to be now the most watched video.
Yeah.
My mum started TikTok because someone recommended it to her for Penny, so she's been taking videos of Penny and putting music over it and putting it on TikTok, and she's been getting some views, which is nice. It's quite funny though, because like she asked me for help. She's like, well, what do you think I should do for like this one? Should I put this kind of music on it? And I'm just looking at her thinking, like, you're turning into me now.
Yeah.
Like, you're making digital content and you're thinking about like who's gonna watch it.
My mom is very tech savvy, and she's been telling me to get on YouTube for like, I think definitely well over a decade now. And she was the one that told me way back when, like in 2006 or 7 or something, hey, you should consider getting on this thing called Facebook. Like, I'm on it, my friends are on it, this, that, and the other. Like, that's why I'm on Facebook. And now she's on Clubhouse as well, and all these other platforms that she's been on. She's got like more engagement and more followers than I do, and she's like on it and doing stuff, and she's like, come on, wake up, like, it's not that hard, I'm doing it, and I'm like, how much older than you, and getting this stuff together and reaching out to people, like, it's not inaccessible, you just gotta be consistent about it, right? And it's like really inspiring, kind of going back to what Ellie and like we were talking about earlier about like age. I've always had, I don't know if I've sought, but I've definitely always had mentors that were definitely older than me, at least by 10 years. And this is something that I don't always realize, like in the moment of that like mentorship, sometimes I realize, wow, so and so really like imparted on me this wealth of knowledge that I can now take forward to do this, that, or the other. But age has never been a barrier, and I think it's partly due to that drive, like obviously from my mom and like colleagues, of just like sharing the knowledge and sharing the wealth of information. I think that's something that I'm really passionate about in this community specifically. Like, nobody here's holding secrets about how they do things. If they do, it's strategic, specifically so that other people will also join in on the bandwagon of like, these are the things that so and such knows, but it's not like we're holding in how to apply a subdivision surface modifier until we get that 1 millionth follower, right? It's just like, I learned how to do this. I have the 2 days that it's going to take for me to put this video together, and I'm going to share it with you. And if you like it, like, share it with others. And then, we can share the wealth. And on that note, if you like everything we've been talking about here on this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe, because it will help the algorithm let you know, and the people that you like and the people that you share this with, that this is something worth watching. And we got to do things like that. So just do it. Yeah, it's really exciting, because I don't know if I would have learned about any of these things on my own without your help specifically. And that wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been in a place comfortable enough to say, I know this thing, or I think I know this thing, and I'm just going to like Feynman technique it out and try to put it out into a video to see if I really know it, and see and gather feedback, and then just like rework that as I need. And that's something that's obviously becoming more and more accessible as we keep pushing down this like technology age of everyone having cell phones in their pockets and supercomputers and the like.
The best way to figure out whether you understand something or not is to try and teach it. If you can't teach something, you don't understand it.
Exactly.
That's the way I've always looked at Blender. Like, I don't try and teach stuff that I don't feel like I know myself, even if I can get away with it. Sometimes I think, I know how to do this thing, and I can get away with like just showing that, and that looks really cool. But then it's like, but I don't really understand how this works. So then I've got nothing to back that up with.
Yep.
And if anyone comes to me even and asks like, oh, well, can I do this thing? I'm going to be like, and I've had to do that once or twice accidentally, where I've thought I've understood how to do something. And then I've had questions about it, and I'm like, I'm going to have to pass you on to somebody else here because I haven't got a clue.
There's so many different ways to do any individual thing. I think the world is becoming even more and more difficult to predict, like in terms of where the future's going. Because like crypto and blockchain, there's like a million different ways to build a system like that. And well, just with anything really, any kind of software, like even with 3D art, we've chosen that UV maps are a way of applying textures to 3D objects, or the geometry is the way of representing, things in 3D space. We have chosen very specific things, but it doesn't mean those are the only ways that things could happen. And I think a lot of the time when new technologies are made, or they come into fruition, or they reach their adolescence, there are so many options, and it's just a case that one of these gets picked and becomes like the norm. But I think something really similar is happening with the crypto world at the moment, where there's so many different coins and so many ideas and so many different methods, and like everyone is trying stuff and everyone's jumping on a different bandwagon. But maybe eventually there'll be a kind of norm, which might come in the form of like an average of all these ideas, where people go, okay, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. It's like digital Darwinism.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's a really good way to put it.
It is. Watching them go after the shorters and the hedge funds is just kind of really bizarre, and then watching Robinhood shut off the trades. Oh,
I mean,
we're in the middle of this. This is gonna be really interesting.
I was just gonna say it's really clever and like eye-opening and informative at the same time.
It really is. I mean, this is more effective than any of those Occupy Wall Street sit-ins were back in 2008. This is just wow. I don't even know what to say about it other than cleverness, I'll say.
Yeah. Unfortunately, what a lot of people haven't considered is a lot of people's pensions money are also tied up in these hedge funds.
Yes,
so it's great for everyone to be like, oh, the hedge funds are taking a hit, but it's like, yeah, but that might be your pension also.
Yeah, 401ks, pensions, and a lot of municipalities. I mean, memory is short, but look what happened to Iceland, at the last financial crash. Oh man, like this is dangerous stuff.
Yeah, Iceland ended up in a bad place. Actually, I forgot about that.
Yep.
I know Britain bailed Iceland out with quite a lot of money. I think some other countries did as well. They ended up in a bad spot, and it can happen. But I mean, I think Robinhood's getting a bit of a bad rap as well, because all these stories have been going around like, oh, they've cut off trades. I think the problem was the fact that they didn't have enough capital to cover the leverage.
You might not
because
have,
most people who are trading on those accounts, the leveragents, they're only actually putting up a small amount of the trades they're trying to buy.
Yep.
You're buying essentially 10% of a share in GameStop, and Robinhood have to put up the rest of that money. Mm-hmm. So it gets to the point where they have to be like, look, we haven't got the cash here to actually cover this. I think they had to try and raise another $1 billion or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've seen the photo of the Redditor who's sort of initiated this bullish or like this Wall Street bets run, and the CEO of Robinhood. If not, I'll try to find it and share it on the Discord. But like side by side, they look like the same person, except one of them is wearing a bandana, and it's really funny because it just kind of adds more attention to the subject of like we're all so similar, but at the same time so different. Because here's one person trying to totally disrupt the system, and here's this other person, seemingly, at least in the terms of the tabloids and the information that's going around it, trying to like prevent that gaming of the system because it benefits that group, or because they don't have the leverage to do it, or they don't have the means to do it. So it's like we're not all that different. What people are doing in these hedge funds is not all that different from what people are trying to do on Reddit.
The whole thing has been spanned. Like I was already on that subreddit long before this went down. I do trades, and like a lot of the people who are buying GameStop or whatever are not poor. I keep hearing them being described as poor all the time. Every day I'm seeing people going like, "Oh, I've just put 60 grand into GameStop." It's like if you have 60 grand to put into anything, you're not poor.
Yeah,
you're not poor by a long shot. One person ended up, I think the cash out eventually at something like 9 million. But they put 50 grand into GameStop, and it was worth something like 50 million at one point. And they took it at 9 million. It's like, damn, that's your life sorted there from one gamble.
One gamble.
But that is a big gamble, though.
It's a huge gamble. It's crazy. Like I think that the story is unfolding, and there's so many facets to that story. Like on one hand, it's great because it shines a light on what hedge funds actually do, because there's not much of a difference between what the Redditors are doing and what hedge funds have been doing and gaming the system. Like they've been gaming it. Like they've been betting on the way up and betting on the way down. That's the nature of their goal. But I think on one hand it's great because it shines a light on it, and it, the populist rage against that system is justified. However, on the other hand, like there are so many people's investments tied up in that, and municipalities and all these other things, that like if you trip the system, be prepared for the downside, because there's a big downside to that.
It's like an amazing opportunity to really think about how these rules are written, and like the infallibility of the market, and sort of like shorting stocks was kind of an oligarchic thing in the past. Like this was done by the hedge funds, JP Morgan and other financial businesses, and they all knew each other, so they could like plan it out together, like a game of Risk. But now it's like a populist take on this thing. So, how, like, there's an assumption that the market is like follows some kind of laws of like reason, but when you have like a populist movement like enter this kind of like board game, like it becomes really unpredictable. And yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's anyone's guess. I mean, I do know that when I used to live in New York and I'd go to parties with these investment bankers and these traders, oh man, I mean the money, the opulence, you'd walk in. I mean, I'm not glorifying this at all, and I didn't partake, but you'd walk in and there'd be like mountains of cocaine on mirrored tables. Like this was insane. It was insanity, and everybody's like hustling to get make their first million by 30, and it's just this culture of, I don't even know what to describe it as, but it's just this. It's almost a cult, and and watching the light being shined so harshly on it, and realizing how much of this stuff affects Middle America. I mean, not in Middle America, the world. Now it's global, like. And how many different things are tied into these decisions that these like few people are making based on this like culture that they've created on Wall Street. It's mind blowing. I think if anything good comes of this, it'll be shining a light and being like, all right, you know what, the casino is not the economy. And I think realizing that we need to divorce the casino from the economy is probably a good thing long term. But how much pain that causes in the midterm is going to be, anyone's guess.
These bailouts keep happening, but they can only happen for so long, and it's going to crack.
It's going to crack. Like this
soon.
This entire last run was predicated on nothing but saving the financial system from something that it should have been saved from after the dot-com burst, which probably should have been restructured after the savings and loan scandal. But it never was. They just printed more money and applied a Band-Aid. They did triage with Band-Aids, basically, by printing more money. And it's like we're reaching an apex. And the next crash is going to be horrendous. And it could be 20 years from now. We have no idea. But it's like we've been kicking the can down the road for so long that it's like, it's not sustainable. You're absolutely right.
I've always had mixed opinions about stocks and stuff, because like I've always been really interested in learning more and playing around, but I think I have a bit of an avoidance thing when it comes to too many abstract layers above reality, right? Because I like the idea that, okay, so you have real life, you have physical value like gold, for example, you have money built on top of that. Okay, so you have what kind of abstraction you need so that you can make promises to each other. And then I think, well, if we go too high, then as you're saying, you can build cultures around things that are technically non-existent but still manipulate real life in some way. I think there's always a danger there, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I've kind of, I guess, avoided ever jumping in or whatever, because to me it always just feels a bit dangerous, I guess. I'm not sure what, how to put it.
it's abstractions on abstractions of ideas. Like I
Yeah.
said, when you're doing trades, you might be doing a short on something. So you're borrowing something that you don't own in order to sell it. Only you're not really borrowing it and you're not really selling it.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
kind of just gambling against a company who will actually not do either of those things. But
Yeah.
they'll run a counter trade so they win either way. So you're not really doing that. But then you can also run a leverage on that. So then you're actually only putting up a small amount of that money and they're
Yep.
putting up the rest.
Yeah.
Only once again, they're not really putting anything up because they're not actually buying or selling anything. So
Exactly.
then you have all of these layers of abstraction, and that's just how the trade itself works. That's not even taking into account what happens with the stock price depends on a million different factors.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Not least of all, just people, how many other people are buying and selling in the exact same way. But then, like, what's happening with the rest of the economy? What's happening with all the other indices, and what people think might happen in the rest of the economy?
It's gambling. That's really all it is. People want to say it's scientific. They want to say it's, oh, this is way above a casino. It's not. It's a casino.
Now, I treat any money that I put in the stock market, I treat the exact same way that I do the occasional game of online blackjack that I play.
Yeah,
Like, that's
pretty
exactly how I look at it. Like, this is a little bit of gambling money. When I've got some spare cash, I'll stick it into the stock market or on blackjack or on a football game or whatever.
Yeah.
And see
I
what happens.
I was telling Ellie about this a couple days ago, but I was thinking about, because I've obviously, prior to this and obviously because of this current situation, been more interested in investing in stocks and cryptocurrencies and the like. And so I was thinking, like if every time that I go out with a group of friends and the occasional like, oh, it's all right, I got this, I'll treat everyone and I don't mind because it's the experience, and that's what it's about for me. It's not really so much about the money. And if somebody decides like, hey, I'll pay you back, that's money that I wasn't counting on having anyway, because I saw that money gone into, if I'm eating, everyone's eating sort of thing. But if someone's paying me back, then it's like, then I have like this funny money to play with. So maybe I'll put that either into a stock or buy some cryptocurrency or whatever. But it's definitely a different and novel way for me, at least, of thinking about like expenditures and like what I've got and what money is. And as we've been saying, it's like a multi-layered ish cake of randomness and like nothing's like very set in stone, but it's not, it's a gamble. It's just like a gamble all the way through, and you can try to game it as much as you want, but at the end of the day it really just depends on all these not abstract, but all these arbitrary like things, like what did Elon Musk tweet about on Tuesday or on this day? And what did so-and-so say? And what are the quarterly earnings like? But why were they like that? And it's, it's so multi-layered that at the end of the day, it's kind of inaccessible, but at the same time, so accessible. And I think that's obviously just like come to light because of this, because a lot of people are now like, what's a cryptocurrency? What's a crypto coin?
Yeah, and with Robinhood, when you don't have to pay per trade, it opened the floodgates. We used to have to pay for trades all the time, like $8 a trade or something. It was so you were more careful with what you traded and the velocity at what you were trading at. Now it's kind of deleveraged from that. But this is probably the fourth or fifth of these bull run bubbles that I've been through and I've seen. Like I had friends that lost a ton in the .com crash back in the early 2000s. That was huge. I mean, you could just put money into anything. Like sockclips.com had an IPO, and all of a sudden it's like the stock rages to like $300 a share, and I mean, it was totally unsustainable. And when it crashed, it took out a lot, but we didn't learn. We went into a new expansion. They started printing more money, and then we had the housing market. So instead of trading stocks, we were trading mortgage-backed securities. Like mortgage-backed securities was nothing more than just like a pool of mortgages rolled together into a tradable vehicle. And you were basing it on a house of cards. And when the subprime market tanked, it took everything out, and people lost. They lost houses, not only just money. They lost houses. And it's gonna happen again because we didn't fix the system. We fixed nothing. We did nothing. We papered over it, and it's just watching this again. This is really, really interesting because there's the other side of investing, which is more safe, and that's the dollar cost averaging. That's the Warren Buffett style where you value invest. You find companies that are solid, their fundamentals are solid. You're not trading, you're not day trading, you're not trading on technicals, you're not looking for those candlesticks, you're not looking for any of that. You're looking at value. Okay, you're looking at price to earnings ratio, you're looking at that stuff, and you're investing for the long term. If the stock goes up, the stock goes down, it doesn't matter because you're dripping. So you're constantly investing over time. It's like there have been a lot of studies done. I can't quote any of them now, so take this as a grain of salt. And this is not financial advice. I am not a financial analyst or financial advisor, but there have been studies done that said if you just put your money into the index funds, like the Vanguard Index 500, right? That has a very low, it's like a percentage handling fee, that you will outperform some of the better hedge funds over time.
Yeah,
and they've shown it.
That's what I do basically. Most of my trades are just in big stock indices because over time they always go up. They go up, like little periods where they go down, but if you look at like the the Russell 2000 over the last 20 years or whatever, it's went up and up and up, and it has these like 6 months like last year where it went down. It's went down at the moment because of all this nonsense with GameStop and everything, but in general I know for a fact in 2 years time that's going to be up from where it is. So all that matters is then have you got the margin to cover any losses when it goes down? And if you want to put that up, you know that you're going to get your money back. It's not even a question. Like realistically, the entire stock market is not going to always fall. It's going to come back because it always does.
It does. In our lifetime, it's not going to fall to the point. I mean, even as far as it fell when the Dow was down back at like 7,000 in 2009 or 2010 or whatever it was. Now it's like 30, and it's just been another bull run.
Exactly.
And if you look at monetary policy and who pulls the strings in the economy and who pulls the levers of power in the world, it's the wealthy, and they're protecting assets above everything else. So as long as they're holding the levers of power, that's how it's going to be. So
you're completely right.
Bet with the house. Don't bet against the house because the house always wins.
There's too much money tied up in the main companies for them to ever be allowed to go under. Individual companies might be allowed to go under, but in general, the US couldn't have half of the big companies. They couldn't allow Google and Apple to go under.
They couldn't,
and Ford
and they won't.
to go under. Those companies, they will get bailed out, and they'll get relief money, and they'll get trade deals done on their behalf just to make sure they can keep making cash. Because it has to happen, otherwise the whole system breaks.
So it really is too big to fail, and it's bet with the house. That's the way I'm going. I mean, I'm not super wealthy or anything, but honestly, like my index funds have performed better than any trades I've ever done. I used to with the .com thing, I was pretty heavily into it in my early 20s, and it was pretty wild. I learned really quickly when that burst. I was very lucky that I pulled out before it all tanked, because I had friends that lost. I mean, they lost everything. They were like flying high. They were like buying cars, and I mean, just awesome. And you watch a repossession, and it's eye opening. But there was the joke for a while that Silicon Valley was the cheapest place to buy a Ferrari. And it was true, because they were getting repossessed right and left. I watched it get hollowed out, and then I watched it bounce back, and I watched it get cut again. It's a casino, and to think that it's anything more than a casino, and that you're somehow smarter than just like a regular degenerate gambler, I'd hate for people to learn that lesson the hard way.
Two big takeaways, at least for me here, like jotting my mental notes, is one, we're not really related to what you were saying earlier, we're not going anywhere different if we just copy and paste the same systems that haven't worked into something like a cryptocurrency, for example. So if like the world and our way of exchanging and bartering with one another is the same as it is now that if we move into this phase, and I think we might, of cryptocurrency and just crypto in general being more accessible and something that's being traded and something that's being like used as a means of exchange. If we copy and paste a system that we have previously into this, then we're just going to end up in the same place, but it's going to be cooler, right? Because it's on your phone. So that's not great. And we're now at a point where we have the opportunity to be part of the conversations that help shape this space. And so if this is something that you're thinking about or something that you're passionate about, then I definitely implore you to go and seek out these sort of groups. I think it's like openseas.org or .io or something that has an NFT Bible online, which is the non-fungible token. If you are interested in crypto art or crypto spaces, definitely look that up. If you remind me, I'll like drop it in the comments. And then the second one was that if and when things crash, because they will, like we know this, it's happened repeatedly, it's just like a way of life, you have to have some backing to be able to support yourself. Just think about in recent years, like how a lot of people were deeply affected by having to be at home or not being able to go to their jobs, and they didn't have a way to make their trade or their passion or whatever profitable to sustain themselves and or their families throughout a moment of crises. And so that's harking back to what we were talking about earlier about being personable, being yourself. Like a lot of the people that were established in some way in the online space or in the media space that had a following, that had a community, that had a like culture about and around them, were able to continue making profit despite the fact that the world was turned on its head, because they had established some form of either, I don't want to keep saying online presence because it's not really about that, but of following a community, a way of maintaining themselves and allowing, it's not so much signaling, but letting other people know, like, this is what I'm about and this is what you can come to me for. And I'm doing this independent of what comes to me or my bank account, but it's something that if you want to support the work that I'm putting into this specific research, whether that be Blender, whether that be like tutorials on whatever, like this is where you can find me and this is where you can do it. Like you should try to have a system like that in place so that when the .com bubble burst, or when the housing market crashes, or when cryptocurrency is no longer a thing, or when the hedge funds go down, or whatever it is, like you're not taken down with them because your source of income and your livelihood depends on these. And the 3D art community specifically, I think, is a really good space to try to build up that rapport in, because it's filled with, for the most part, a lot of people that really genuinely want to see you do better and grow.
Having an audience gives you space to pivot when things change.
Yes.
If they're interested in you.
That
Because
is the best thing you can do.
if people are interested in a company that you happen to be working for, if you leave, no one cares, because it's the company that people are paying attention to. If people pay attention to you, then if you pivot, then they can come with you. But
that's my rant in like 2 sentences.
Yeah.
Somebody asked what happens to my channel, because I love my channel. What happens if I die or something? They're like, is it going to carry on? I'm like, it'll probably just be left up.
Yeah, I like what ArtStation do. When an artist passes away, they change it to, they put a little notice above the name that says remembering this person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Just about like the whole stocks and abstraction thing again. I guess one of the things that kind of concerns me is that when you are gambling with abstraction, a self-fulfilling prophecy is, I guess, the term that I would use. Speculation changes the world, right? Because it tries to predict the world, and like every prediction about the future is wrong, right? Without any of the accurate data, which we don't have. Sure, the universe may be deterministic, but no one has access to like every position of every atom, every wave function, whatever.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah, we don't.
Speculation is based on what people think is going to happen, but then the future changes based on that speculation. And I'm like, this is a bad equation, you know. Like it's not a good way to.
Black swans are everywhere.
It's not a good way to run a planet, you know. So I've always been a little bit cautious about that. But I think over the years I've been learning about what I believe in, because I think younger me might have been like, yeah, stocks and data and abstract, let's write programs to predict things, and yeah, that'll be fun. But now I'm thinking, well, I guess there's maybe a bit more of a spiritual perspective here, which is like, no matter what happens, always keep your hand on the ground. Like, no matter how high you go, make sure that you've always got a route back. And I think, or I hope, humanity will try and keep that in the future. Even if like we transcend, like leave our physical bodies and start living in like cyber realms, that I think there will always be a route back to reality in some way.
Yeah.
So
I just think that the one phrase that I kind of go by is that whenever looking at this stuff is that technology changes really quickly, human nature doesn't.
Yeah.
Human nature is a much slower evolution than our technology.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at like the latest craze with Robinhood and and GameStop, and it's everybody's rushing in, gold rush, and like human behavior doesn't change, human nature doesn't change. So even going into crypto, it's gonna like if we go into crypto 10,000 years from now, human nature will have had time to evolve. But rushing in right now, it's going to be the same system. It's going to end up being the same system because human nature, you're going to have, the most ambitious are going to be at the top of the chain, and it's going to structure to protect the people at the top of the chain.
Oh,
just how it
any
is.
spot like where we're at is just a manifestation of where we've been in constant battle with like where we want to go and where we think like we can reach. And so it's just like every moment is that. And then like Curtis was saying, like we can't rely on our projections of pseudo futures in order to build these things to a degree, right? Like we can think of forward in time and say like maybe this might happen, but at the end of the day, like there's no in this like alternate multiverse universe theory, there's no saying like that's exactly what's going to happen based on this. So it's all gamble.
So here's a question which we shouldn't answer now because we've been recording for 2 hours, so we'll close this off in a sec. There will come a point where humans are going to be engineered, I think. Even if it's like whether or not it's done commercially or whatever, I don't know, Neuralink, etc. But where either human nature is going to change by augmentation or by like genetic engineering to remove certain factors or add certain factors or expand capacities or whatever. But if it's done in a commercial and capitalist way, then inevitably those kind of changes are going to be affected by the stock market and consequently speculation. So the intentions behind those businesses will probably be affected by that, right? So it's just, I guess, a concerning thing to keep in mind. I don't think it's a question that has an answer now, but like, I guess it's just one to think about.
You ever watch Blade Runner?
I'm going to have to go, unfortunately, because my earphones are bleeping at me here. They're out of battery. Catch you later, guys.
All right, see ya.
Bye.